was one of those things. As time went on, I realized this isn't that big of a deal. This isn't a life-ending experience, and I'm gonna make something of it. I'm not gonna become one of the statistics that goes back. And that's scary too, because there's a huge recidivism rate. It's 60 or 70% of people go back to federal prison within 3 to 5 years. Yeah. And that's scary.
All right, guys, we're back for another episode of the Fully Funded podcast where we discuss all things from health, wealth, and lifestyle. And I'm here with my co-host, Christian Lopez, and a very special guest, Mr. Vic DaVore. How you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me, Zach. Christian, I appreciate it.
Awesome. We actually have a history, right? We've done some business together, and obviously, I'm looking forward to talking a little bit more on the personal side of things today. And yeah, man. So who's Vic DaVore?
Who's Vic DaVore? Well, you might not know this, but I actually started in radio here in Orlando.
Really?
Yep. Back in the early 2000s.
Just close your eyes and you'll hear Dan Patrick.
I love that. Dan Patrick. What a voice. The golden voice. So I was here in Orlando. I got into radio. I worked at what's now iHeartRadio, was Clear Channel at the time. I was a morning show producer at Magic 107.7. And then I shifted over to doing traffic reports. And I was doing traffic reports. I was telling Gabby, who's behind the scenes with headphones on right now, listening to my voice very attentively, I hope. But I was telling Gabby that I worked in traffic. I was in the Orlando market. I was at the Space Coast. I was in Jacksonville. I was in Tallahassee. And I was in Panama City, all from the comfort of our studios in Maitland, Florida, which up here in the penthouse on the 75th floor here in Lake Mary, you might see behind us. So can you see Maitland over there? I think so.
Yeah, it's that way.
So I was in radio, and it was kind of what got me into media, to be honest. So that side of things really got me into digital media, because by the 2000s, the early 2000s, everything had gone digital. I did learn how to splice like the reel to reel and all that stuff. But by the time I was actually there, it was all digital. So that kind of got me interested in digital media, which got me into photography. And from there, I ended up actually starting a business that was selling engravable gifts online.
Okay.
The primary thing that I was selling, and I'll tell you, here's what I kind of want to talk about too during our time. I want to talk about how I started DeVore Design. I want to talk about kind of how I scaled it up. And I also, the main thing that I really want to share today is why I am who I am. And I think it's a very interesting story. Some may know, some may not know. And I might share some things that people didn't know.
You're actually kind of a man of mystery.
I love that.
Even every time that I get to spend some time with you, I'm like, I did not know that about you. And I think that it's kind of cool to have a little bit of an element of surprise for people. And I mean, you're not a man of mystery because you're not open or not open or unwilling to talk about who you are, your past. I just think that you're a man of mystery.
Well, I think I share positivity I exude positivity to a point where I think that's one of my main assets that I share with people is just, I try to be positive. I try to be, I don't swim in other people's trash, so to speak. So I think that's one of the reasons that people like to hang out with me.
I don't think I've ever seen you with like a gloom face but I would say the only mystery I'm looking to solve today is where you got those boots from.
My Taft boots.
Yeah.
You've changed your style kind of over the years, right? Let's actually take it way back. So you kind of told, Vic DaVore in terms of the broadcast stuff, but I think it's always interesting when we find out who people thought they were going to be when they were kids. So did somebody come to you one day and just say, man, you got a great voice, you should do this? Or how did that all happen?
Well, I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, down south, and in high school, senior year, I was voted wittiest, so I was the class clown, and I was prom king. I was actually prom king.
You got that one too?
What?
You got that one too?
I said it checks out.
Oh, okay.
It checks out, yeah. So wittiest and then prom king.
Okay.
and also the founder of the Computer Club. So I would like to think that class of 97,
Multifaceted individual, huh?
I'd like to think that in 97, I paved the way for making geeks and nerds cool.
Yeah, I was just about to say, like, how do you go from being a nerd to being the prom king? That's pretty interesting.
I was the same person I am now.
Yeah.
I mean, I got along with everybody. You know how cliquey high school can be. I didn't ride those cliques. I hung out with everybody, and I didn't get involved in gossip and the minutia that people get involved with in high school, and I just had a good time, and everybody had a good time around me. So
one thing that people are going to learn on this podcast today is you're a very, very successful business person, right? An entrepreneur. And looking back now, how has, really just kind of being neutral and being friends with everybody, when you look back at that philosophy, how's that helped you in business today?
I respect everybody, even if there's a competitor and an adversary. I respect everybody. We're all, at the end of the day, just trying to be the best that we can be, get through life. As a business person, I want to serve my customers. I want to serve my clients while also giving my employees and staff an opportunity to be successful. And I think it's just respect. I think that would probably be one of the root kind of personality traits that I have, and humility too. I don't have an ego.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say I don't have an ego. I do have an ego, but I don't let that ego get in the way of me dealing with people and being a human. I make mistakes. My staff makes mistakes. People around me make mistakes. I'm not going to ever create a problem from a problem. I am solution driven, and I just want to serve our customers and try to make everybody. I want to make everybody happy, but I really want to solve problems if they arise, which they do.
Yeah.
So as a and I'll kind of go through that process, but as a media company, what we do is exceptionally subjective, because I can show you guys photos and you guys could have two completely different opinions on what you think of them. And then, Gabby's going to be over here saying how terrible it is. You guys are going to say how much you love it.
The funny thing is, Gabby and I we usually have a difference of opinion. She thinks things are great. I think they're terrible, and vice versa. But I think maybe we're starting to agree a little bit more on something.
Meanwhile, over here, I'm just focusing on the price.
Well, you know what? But that's part of the business side of things too. And that's part of I think when it comes down to strategizing as a business person, you've got to realize that you've got price, but you've also got staff, and you've got to make sure that all those things kind of add up and work for everybody. And, that's part of that process. So, and I'll tell you, having closed 2 loans with you. So the house that I'm currently in,
Yes.
you guys closed the loan.
Yes.
And then shortly thereafter, we refinanced at 275 or something insane.
Yeah.
And you guys also did the refi, so thank you very much. And something that you probably know after closing those for me, I started DeVore Design out of bankruptcy.
Okay.
So, and I did disclose that, just in case anybody's...
It's okay.
You can't hide that.
Right.
So I started DeVore Design out of bankruptcy, and I was at a point in my life where, what do I do? So that engravable business that I had debt and just insurmountable competition that I had a supplier that was basically competing with me. I couldn't compete.
What were you engraving?
The main thing I was selling $1 million a year in Zippo lighters.
Zippo.
As wild and crazy as that sounds.
Well, where did that come from?
I started, it was...
Were you a Zippo lighter guy?
For a little while, for a short period of time. And at times, Zippo, the company, they're based in Bradford, Pennsylvania, I believe. They were only selling direct to business to business. They weren't selling direct to consumer. I created a really great consumer-driven site and concept with engravables and because you could take a $10 lighter and turn it into 30 with engraving.
Yeah.
So it was very profitable. But they saw, I think, the way that, and of course it was just the time. We're talking about 2010, 2012. So they started to sell direct to consumer, and then they started pushing people like me out, and I couldn't compete. So I had to file bankruptcy, and I had, all this camera gear and stuff because I was taking product pictures. I was doing promotional things like this. And I had the camera gear, and I'm like, what do I do? Because I mean, it was literally, I could do whatever I want. And I wanted to get into photography, but I didn't know exactly how. And my father at the time purchased a drone. I almost brought the drone in today, but he bought a drone. He just thought it was cool. And I thought that drone was so cool too. And I figured, let me make a business out of it. So
And what year was this?
This would have been 2013.
Okay.
And I thought, what can I do with a drone? I mean, I could do aerial photography, and and then I thought, well, real estate, there's really a use for it, but you can't just start a business and take the picture outside aerial pictures of houses, because there's not a lot of usefulness to that. So,
and at the time in 2013, were aerial photos like a big thing?
They were getting there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I feel like this. I want to see what this old school drone looked like. I mean, 10 years ago.
Yeah,
school.
big white. Yeah, and not a great camera.
How's your current one? It's probably like that tiny. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. But it inspired me to get into real estate photography. I saw a real opportunity there. No pun intended. A real opportunity in real estate photography. So I saw that opportunity, and I educated myself on architectural photography at the time. I did my first shoot over on the West Coast, and it took me 2 days. I had flash photography and all this crazy stuff. $300. That's all I mean, it was my first shoot. And from there, I leveraged that media, exactly what I tell my customers. Leverage the media that we provide to get more listings. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the investment that I think you make. Because at the end of the day, let's face it, real estate photography, it's as disposable as it gets. You take the photos, you use it for the listing, you sell the listing. What else do you use the photos for? Well, hopefully you can use the photos to actually leverage more listings. So I started the business that way. And then by 2000, so I officially started the business because I was broke. So I didn't incorporate right away. I didn't want to spend money on doing that. I incorporated officially in 2015, February 2015. I incorporated the business, and I just got busier and busier and busier. First full year, I think I did 13 grand in revenue.
Yeah.
We're multi-millions now.
That's awesome. And I want to talk about your dad for a second.
Sure.
So your dad was instrumental in kind of giving you the vision where he did. Why did he buy this drone in the first place?
He knew. I think he bought the drone at the end of the day just because he felt bad for me, because I was going through that divorce. Or not divorce. Jeez.
We'll get to that story later.
Now, yeah. But I was going through the bankruptcy. I just had my second son at the time, and it was just a tough time. I think he just bought it. He thought it was cool. And so and a question that you asked earlier, like growing up, what I wanted to be, I did want to be a pilot. That was what I always wanted to be. If I were to go back in time, I would probably be an airline pilot. But that aside,
hold on. You got to tell me about the airline pilot thing. Where is that coming from?
Two of my uncles on my mom's side were professional pilots. One was a 747 captain for Flying Tigers, which became FedEx. The other was a cargo captain on DC-8s for ATI, and then he shifted to the 767 aircraft. But they were both captains, and I think I've just got aviation in my blood. I've always been interested. I was a student pilot down in Fort Lauderdale, and I think I just had too much ADD. This is when I was 18 or 19 years old. I just didn't have
to go back to get it.
Well, I know I never got my pilot's license. No. I want to. It's absolutely something.
Fun fact about Christian: he wants to get his pilot's license.
I've done the research, and I'm just time is the only issue.
That's 100%. 2 years ago, I was like, I'm gonna do it, and then here we are. I haven't even started.
Oh, you realize how? I mean, it's not like you can just go and take a driver's test. It's like hours upon hours, and it's expensive, and it adds up over time.
Yeah,
but that is cool that idea went into driving a drone and then photography. I mean, you think those are big jumps, but they're really not.
No. And, again, at the end of the day, it was creating a product and a service that was going to be able to serve a group of customers the best way possible. I was leveraging my professional background in digital marketing and combining that with a service that realtors needed. And let's face it, in 2015, we were kind of making that shift from a completely different real estate market into a healthier market. And real estate photography was becoming, it was good timing. I mean, it was good timing. Real estate photography was becoming more prominent. A lot of my competitors at the time, they didn't even offer transparent pricing. So realtors had to reach out, tell them about the property, and then the real estate photographer would give them a quote. I was like, no, I'm coming from the e-commerce world, even though the business failed, but I still understand you got to have pricing transparency for a service that's utility. And I knew that. So I created a menu of services. This is what you get. This is the price. And by 2017, I was at a pivot point where it's either I need to triple my prices and become like a boutique photographer, or I need to scale. And that's what I decided to do. And you know, so it was 2017 and 2018 that I really started to hire and bring those photographers on.
Yeah, and I think that's a great topic to talk about, is scaling. You know, I cannot think of another photography firm other than yours that actually has done a great job in doing the scale. And I think it's for a couple different reasons. Number one, most of the photography business I see out there are like one-man bands. And I find that in a business that there is some type of skill, right? Because for photography, you got to have a skill set, right? You got to know how to take the right pictures. You got to know how to edit it. Like, there's a skill involved. It's not just opening a storefront, unlock it, and people walk into your store. I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, it's very difficult for them to scale because they're so worried about the product that they're putting out and if that's going to be duplicatable to what people know them for. You know, in our business, we used to be, you know, top producers, and we decided, hey, we want to get out of production. Like, I'm sure you're not doing photo shoots anymore. Maybe you are. Yeah. But, you know, there was a time where it's like, man, like, how do we take our energy and give that to our staff and have them do the same thing? So what were you saying are some of those pivotal things that you were like, man, I can't just think like a single person and actually be able to have, I mean, how many photographers do you have on your staff?
We have over 15.
Yeah. So talk to me about how you were able to keep that same product and service and quality that people knew you for, and able to scale it from thousands to millions.
And most of the photographers, by the way, I'm just going to add that we added in 17 and 18, they're still with us today.
Wow.
So the first thing,
there has to be a system in place to do that.
So that's what I was just going to say. When it comes to scaling, the first thing that you have to do is document every single thing that you do. Every single thing. You have to put it in black and white, and you have to document it. You have to have an SOP. You have to have procedures for everything, because you can't scale without having some kind of foundation of organization. And that's what I did. I spent 6 months to a year. Every time I was at a photo shoot, I would think of something and I would, put it down. I use Asana kind of as my task tracking and brainstorm tracking.
Did you say sauna?
Asana. ASANA.
I was like, you sit in the sauna after this, or you take your notes? I'm like, me too.
I don't know, paper and sweat work together, but we'll figure it out.
But I would, in the field, I would think of things, and I have it's 60 pages now. It's our media standards guide. Wow. And it outlines every single part of our field operation.
What's the most important part of that guide?
Professionalism. I mean, and that's something that you can't teach, but the truth, the reality in my business and really every business at the end of the day, when you're serving clients, professionalism, in my opinion, is 60%. The skill set is 40%, especially when you have a solid framework for processes and procedures, because you have to be professional.
Mm-hmm. So scaling is all about creating processes and procedures that people can plug into, that it doesn't matter who they are, as long as they follow that, anybody can do it, essentially.
It gives you a way to quantify people's performance. So if there's a problem, I can identify it and I can say, page 13, we talk about this, this, and this. So it's not me or it's not the client being picky. We have that outlined in our media standards. Right. And that is a huge help when it comes to managing, which I'm sure you guys can understand. You guys are in a highly regulated industry. I'm in a completely unregulated industry. Mm-hmm. So I had to build those regulations, so to speak, those processes, those procedures, to not only just keep things consistent, but to give me a tool to manage the process. And that's important. You know, you need a tool to manage the process in addition to keeping everything consistent, because especially now you got 15 photographers, and our system does allow clients to set preferred photographers. If they just like to work with 1 or 2 people, they can. But if they're just looking for availability, I still want, you know, if they book this photographer or this photographer or this photographer, there's a standard, and they're not going to notice the difference from one to the next to the next.
So I was gonna say, so you build out this platform, right? This SOP. You look on bringing on people. At the time, you're doing real estate photography, but you do more than just taking photos of a house and getting an overview picture. How did you balance bringing on people and then also expanding your product services? I'm sure you had to do that in order to keep people continually fed.
So in 2020, I decided to get into the home staging business, which is very different, but we had the capital to invest into it because it takes a lot of capital. You're talking about, you know, $250,000 in furniture up front, and then a warehouse and staff. So to get to that point, and what kind of inspired that too is, let's face it, that's a peripheral service. But if you're doing home staging, you need to have photography. You're not going to stage a house and then not take pictures of it, not have media of it. So it felt like a natural fit. All of the peripheral services that we offer, including social media, we're doing website design now, it's all geared towards real estate agents and the clients that we serve. So that's ultimately what my objective is in scaling out and creating new services. What do our clients need? What are the peripheral services that we can provide our client base with that would provide more value to them and provide more value to us as an industry, as a company?
Yeah.
And let's face it, like if you're doing website design, you're going to be heavy on graphics. You're going to be heavy on video. We have every time DeVore Design goes out and does a shoot, if we capture community media, like a clubhouse, a community pool, a front entrance, we catalog that. We keep all that footage. We keep all those photos. We have a huge library of just a massive database. It's organized by city and then neighborhood name. And so we have all this media. So when we're designing websites for clients now, you want to do something for Heathrow? You want to do something for Stony Brook? Sure. We've got a ton of media that we can just throw in.
Is there a business and a business there that that is going to be birthed out of having all that media?
It's only for Orlando. So but at the end of the day, yeah, I think it adds value to the services that we provide at the end of the day. I think it adds value to our social media services too.
Without adding a financial burden to your company.
Correct. Or to our clients for that matter, because we've got this database. If a client wants to do a social media video, again, in Stony Brook, they can talk about Stony Brook in the front of Stony Brook, and we don't have to capture a bunch of B-roll footage that could take hours and cost money. We already have it. It's built in. So that side of it has really helped. And again, that's one of those things that as we've scaled up, that's a post-production procedure.
Yeah.
So when we have that community media, it's important to do that. And, something that we talked about in our pre-interview, very official pre-interview, Gabby was part of it, did a full tour of the facility here, gorgeous, 77th floor.
She's getting all the shout outs today.
I always like there should be a camera on Gabby, FYI, guys. You need to.
The problem is she controls the cameras and she purposely does it.
But part of the pre-interview too was kind of talking about why I am the way I am. And there's a certain level of humility, I think, that I'd have, a lack of ego. And that was driven by, some of my past experiences. I don't know if you guys want to kind of segue into that or if you just want me to keep on
What keeps a man like you humble, I guess is the question.
So prior to, I will say, between radio and between my Zippo business, I was involved.
Here goes the man of mystery.
Yeah, here goes the man of mystery. This is the Netflix series. In between those two parts of my life, I was doing online marketing and payment processing for overseas pharmacies in India. So I had a series of websites, and people could come to the website.
So your website building skills came in play, huh?
and all those digital marketing skills. So people came to the website, and ultimately they were ordering prescription medications without a prescription. Their payments were being processed through Cyprus and various other places, and it was illegal. I wasn't selling, OxyContin or anything like that, but there were some controlled substances, and overtly, really, what was happening was money laundering. So, here you go on a financial podcast. I'm talking about money laundering and not to do it. I don't endorse it.
Let's talk more about it, Vic.
Well, how do they? Obviously, it's bad.
It's bad. Nobody's endorsing it or encouraging it. And I can tell you, I did prison time for it. So
let's talk about the lifestyle portion.
The lifestyle portion, it took me about 4 hours a week. I had a penthouse apartment. It wasn't on the 96th floor like this office is.
Or now the 96th.
We just keep
Went
going
up 20 floors, right?
But it was on the 28th floor on Fort Lauderdale Beach.
Right.
I was 24 years old at the time. I was living a life. I mean, it was fantastic. I had, and it was funny. I had started technically here in Orlando because it was after radio, but I was like, well, I'm making a lot of money. I want to go and live down by the beach again.
Yeah.
So I moved back to Fort Lauderdale, which kind of worked out well, and I'll tell you why. So I moved back down to Fort Lauderdale, and didn't take that much time. I had done this business for a while, and again, I knew what I was doing was not legal. There was a time up to that point where the DEA was sending cease and desists.
Mm-hmm.
It hadn't been fully criminalized, but my case was one of the first that actually set that precedent, and it became criminalized. So 5 a.m. one morning, banging on the front door, I'm in the condo, and it was the DEA. They had 7 agents there. They had the U.S. Marshals. There were DEA agents from Philadelphia. My case was out of Philadelphia because that's where the drugs were ultimately coming in from. And next thing you know, I'm in a courthouse. Yeah. So and also on the news, and there's articles, and it's like, oh my gosh. Luckily, they mispronounced my name on most of the radio stations as Vic DaVore. It's DeVore, just if you're wondering.
Right. Yeah, DeVore. Was it the money that drove you?
It was a little bit of everything. It was the money. It was the idea of creating something and just being able to sell a product. We sold a lot of different things. I say we, it was just me, but I sold a lot of different things. It wasn't just, Xanax or, it was like there was some ED stuff in there, but there was a lot of...
Keep any of the blue pills?
I did not keep the blue pills. They're probably well expired by now. But you
never had a expired blue pill before? That's a great thing. I would know.
You got to go with the follow-up question. I left it alone there.
But
that puts me up in follow-up, by the way.
I am always curious. I asked the question about money because I think, in our mid-20s and stuff, like, we're really driven by money. When I look at you as an individual, a successful business person, I don't look at somebody who is driven by money. So I think there's an evolution. Like, you have a family, you have children. Like, as your entrepreneurial journey came on, I'm sure you've slowed down in some of your wild ways. Like, how did that experience make you who you are today, and slow you down and focus on the right things? Like, where are some of your priorities today?
Well, yeah. So, I ended up being sentenced to federal prison through that process. There was 2 years of pretrial release. There was hearings. I had to go to court, and I'm living in Fort Lauderdale. I did move back to Orlando in that interim. Went back to radio. They accept anybody. And I was actually doing well at the time, but I did end up doing time in federal prison. Going through that experience, it humbled me. There's nothing more humble than losing your freedom. And I deserve to. I don't dispute that.
Yeah.
I deserve to, but it was a humbling experience. When your freedom is taken away and you realize, and you're looking around, listen, I'm in federal prison. I'm lucky. I had a relatively short sentence, but I'm with people that are on the tail end of a 30-year sentence.
How long was yours?
Mine, 15 months.
Okay.
At the end of the day, 15 months in federal prison.
How long did it feel?
I mean, in your mid-20s, it felt like a lot, but it was one of those things. As time went on, I realized this isn't that big of a deal. This isn't a life-ending experience, and I'm going to make something of it. I'm not going to become one of the statistics that goes back. And that's scary, too, because there's a huge recidivism rate. It's 60 or 70% of people go back to federal prison within 3 to 5 years. Yeah. And that's scary. That weight is on your shoulder because you just kind of think like, why? I don't plan on doing anything wrong, but like, is the system that crazy? What got me in that trouble was really a quest for entrepreneurship, just focus in the wrong direction.
So you were always an entrepreneur from day one. You thought like that. I wonder if a lot of people who come out of federal prison or prison in general, they're scared, am I going to get a job or something like that? Did that ever come across your mind? Like, man, I got to start another business because nobody's going to hire me.
Absolutely. That was part of my motivation to being on the entrepreneurship side. And I'll be very honest. It was terrifying when I first started DeVore Design because here I was going in people's homes and I had a fear that if people knew that I was a convicted felon, and listen, I was convicted that there was distribution of controlled substances, importation of misbranded substances, like they have all kinds of weird charges, but the money laundering is really why I did the time. So it wasn't like I was convicted of some crime that would, I think be perceived more negatively, but I still was afraid of that. And I kept it quiet. And it wasn't really until more recently that I've even
why are you starting to talk about this? Like, did you hide it because you thought that you wouldn't achieve the success you did, and now that you're where you're at, you could start to be more you? I mean, like, where is this all coming from?
I think the reason that I'm motivated to share the story now is because, first of all, I know that there's people in our industry that have similar experiences. So, there's a shame element there that it doesn't need to be. I did my time. I accept what I did. I know it was wrong. I'm never going to do it again.
But is it easier now that you have credibility to talk about it? Like, would you suggest people openly talking about their past so that people connect with them on a deeper level earlier?
Yeah, I feel, well, here's what I'll say. I feel like at this point in time, people have gotten to know me and they know that this isn't something that is a part of my past that steered me down the wrong direction. This is a part of my past that actually helped shape me to the person that I hope people like.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I want to prove is, you can never judge a book by its cover, because I know for a fact, I've told this story to people individually and their mouth always is like, what? Because I just don't have that look that I think people would expect. Of being a convicted felon and spending time in federal prison.
And the last thing I want to cover before we wrap up is we talk a lot today about systems, process, and scaling. But at the end of the day, when you flip a business upside down, you shake everything out, what's left is the people. And how, as a business owner, an individual, friend, father, everything, have you really paid attention to relationships and people that has made you successful? What kind of advice can you give to people?
I'll be honest, it's a struggle. As an entrepreneur, I use the term workaholic kind of carefully because it can have a legitimately negative connotation, and it's hard sometimes to balance those things. I try to, just as I said, I structured the business. I try to structure my life and include a fair amount of time for personal life, for friendship and family, and I have to be aware of that at all times. I mean, I think it's just part of the entrepreneurial struggle that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. It's not easy, and I'm not saying I'm great at that. So
awesome. Well, guys, this was another episode of the Fully Funded Podcast. Vic, I appreciate you so much for coming on. Vic DaVore, not DeVore, right?
Correct. Vic
So
DaVore.
congrats on your upcoming 10 years, right? You said 20.
Yeah.
There you go. 10. This is year 10.
It'll be
right
year
now.
10 next year.
That's awesome. Congrats about that.
If you guys want to get in touch with Vic or use him for his phenomenal real estate services, we're going to get some information in the comments section of the show to get on Christian or my calendar in regards to talking anything Fully Funded. We'd love for you to like, subscribe, and make sure you guys comment. We'll see you guys back on another episode of Fully Funded. Peace out.